Was born in Virginia in 1769 and moved to Kentucky early on before it became a state. He served in the legislature there before moving to Vincennes, Indiana Territory in 1806, and he was the Deputy U.S. Attorney General ready to indict and prosecute crime in Clark County and all over Indiana. Actually, he was a spy for the pro-slavery governor, William Henry Harrison, and he kept an eye on a young politician in Jeffersonville named Jonathan Jennings, who was anti-slavery, and they were enemies to the death, believe me. Hurst and Jennings disliked each other greatly, and Jennings defeated William Henry Harrison and all his candidates from Virginia who were pro-slavery. Jennings' motto was "No slavery in Indiana." And I'd like to let you know that Clark County is one of the reasons there was no slavery in Indiana. And it was because of the convention at Springville in 1808. Politicians from Clark County figured out what Harrison was doing was sending letters to the Congress, the U.S. Congress, claiming that he represented all the people of Indiana when he actually did not. And he wanted slavery to be grandfathered in because he was from Virginia and they had slaves and that's what they were used to. And so he was lying to the Congress. The Clark County men got together and they wrote up a document asking Congress to wait until Indiana had enough people to become a state. And once it did, let the people decide for themselves whether or not they wanted the evil of slavery here. And Congress, always looking for the easy way out, nothing has changed, took up this, and it was called the Doctrine of Squatter Sovereignty. And if you look it up, Clark County men don't get any credit for it. This was 1808. Many years later, Lewis Cass of Ohio got the credit for writing the Doctrine of Squatter Sovereignty, but it doesn't belong to him, it belongs to us. And so they outsmarted William Henry Harrison, and no slavery in Indiana. That was the beginning of the end of slavery here. Personally, Hurst weighed 300 pounds. He was blunt-spoken, a sociable drinker, and he liked jokes. He was a familiar figure in Jeffersonville who was remembered for his bandana handkerchief and his snuff box, which he carried with him everywhere he went. And this, like I said, is his house. He died on January 1st, 1850, and here he is. And one of his daughters married William Leviston, or Livingston. The name was corrupted from Livingston. And then one married a Patterson, and so you have the Pattersons like Samuel Patterson here. Samuel Patterson was born in Tennessee in 1806, and he was by trade a clockmaker. After coming to Jeffersonville, he was the lessee of the old Indiana State Prison and made a fortune from convict labor because you worked them just like you did enslaved people, and they got paid maybe pennies for whatever work they did. So he got all the benefit from that. At that time, the prison was right across from Patterson's house on Market Street, which is still there. And you can see it. It's a great big double house that looked like it's been stuccoed over on West Market. I can't think of the address number right now. Mr. Patterson was considered a sage by people who lived in Jeffersonville, and they consulted him for advice on all sorts of things in life. He coined the phrase, "A man's best friend is his dog and maybe his mother." During the Civil War, Patterson leased his land near Clarksville, which now you know as the Interpretive Center at the Falls of the Ohio, to the Union Army to build Camp Joe Holt. And the reason it was built there is because the Union Army was not allowed to raise any troops in Kentucky, although there were people from Kentucky who wanted to join the Union and fight. So they did it right across the river in Indiana on that land. This provided potential husbands for Samuel Patterson's daughters and their friends, and so many social events were held at the house that's still there on Market Street and inviting handsome young soldiers to the old Patterson house. One funny story about that is, it's when the camp was new and the recruits were still pouring in. What do you do if you're going to go into the Army? You don't take your good clothes with you to the camp. You wear rags that you used and brogans that you wore when you were farming. And so the Patterson girls were so excited, they and their friends, and they planned this big party for the soldiers, and oh, they were so handsome, blah, blah, blah. And they invite them to the house on Market Street, and here they come, dressed in rags and old muddy brogans. And the girls were just mortified to death and embarrassed, and the guys were embarrassed. And they didn't have enough cake and punch for everybody, so they had to cut the cake in tiny little pieces so everybody got a bite of cake. But everybody got over themselves, and they had many more parties and things at that house for the enlisted men at Camp Joe Hope. Then came the call one night in December, I believe it was 1862 or 3, and they were called out at midnight to cross the river into Louisville to help a fight against, I guess it was Braxton Bragg, because people were worried that he was going to attack Louisville and then cross over into Indiana. And so the soldiers came marching down Market Street at midnight, and the Patterson girls and all their friends were out on their front porch crying and waving their handkerchiefs at the guys. So there were many romances and quite a few marriages that Camp Joe Hope provided for people in Jeffersonville. So this is Henry Hurst. This is Samuel Patterson and his wife. Samuel Patterson, as I told you, had amassed a fortune. He died a pauper, but he was much loved in the city of Jeff, and he had quite a big funeral out here at Walnut Ridge.